the cloud. There it is. Admit. Okay. Now let me make you host. Colleen, do you have host privileges now?
Yeah, but I don't know if I needed them because it says I could share a screen anyway. So
Oh.
Yeah. So let's see here if this works. All right.
I see your screen.
Okay. Well, you don't see mine. Okay, here you go.
I do see yours. Is it? Everybody else, can you see the screen? Okay, I see some heads nodding. That's great. Thumbs up from Victoria. Thank you.
Yeah, where is the presenter?
It's right there next to the, you were just there, that little.
This? No.
Nope, 3 more over to your right, the podium. 1 more.
Oh, sorry, I can't see that. That's why. The thing's in my way. Okay, there we go.
All right, well, welcome everybody. It's 1 minute past 10. I'm going to continue to monitor the waiting room, but I think we have everybody that has registered. Welcome back and thank you for joining us again. I'm going to give a very brief introduction to Colena Johnson, and then I will let her take it from there. I will let everybody know that this session is being recorded. And you know, obviously if there's any privacy issues with the students, we won't be blasting this all over the place, but we did want to record it in case there were any students that were not able to attend. And I also want to say that I know Colina is hoping for some interactions and some conversations. So I encourage all of you online to either unmute yourselves and gently come into the conversation with your questions verbally, or I'll be monitoring the chat box as well. And you can type your questions into the chat. And you know, if it's appropriate, I will interrupt and ask your question, or we might save some of the questions to the end of the presentation. All right, so quick introduction to Colena. Colena Johnson joined Merck in 1997, so she's had a long career at Merck and is currently the director of Merck's Research Laboratories in the Departments of Safety Assessment and Laboratory Animal Sciences. And she is also a board certified laboratory animal medicine veterinarian. And Colena, I do need to apologize to you in your bio sketch that I sent out. I did not include your credentials after your name, so I will make those changes and get that sent out again. She does hold a Bachelor of Science from, and can you say, is it
Tuskegee?
Tuskegee? What
Tuskegee.
is it?
Tuskegee, like Tuskegee Airmen.
All right. All right, thank you. Tuskegee University, and a Doctor of Veterinary Medicine from the same university. And a master's in laboratory animal medicine from the Pennsylvania State University at Hershey Medical Center. Now I'm going to let Colena obviously tell you a lot more about her professional journey, but I'd like to highlight a couple of the comments that she made, which I hope you had the time to read from her bio sketch. Community service for her is one of her passions, and she volunteers with various organizations like mine, not only to give this talk, but also as a volunteer board member for our organization. And she's very passionate about organizations that serve underrepresented populations of students. She's committed to mentoring, people development, and STEM initiatives. And you know, I do hope she comments on this as well. But in her free time, she enjoys spending time with her family, reading, swimming, doing yoga, meditating, and cooking. Those are all things I think we do as we get older, right, Colena?
Yeah.
Especially the yoga and the meditating. I've been picking those up lately as well. So thank you very much for joining us today. And I'll let you take it away. I'm going to put myself on mute. And like I said, I'll be monitoring the chat box for you.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. So thank you for attending. I do like doing these types of things just to meet new people, to see what young people are thinking about these days, what sort of careers they're looking into, and then any way that I can help sway you to continue in biomedical research, to become a veterinarian, or to even become a board certified veterinarian. So I hope you enjoy this. And again, as David said, I'd like you to ask questions freely throughout the presentation. And I will be calling on you some too, because I'm going to share some I'd like you to share also. So my first slide is just, who am I? And this was a question that was asked to me in one of the leadership trainings that I went to. And when people ask you, who are you? What do you usually say? A lot of people think that who they are is what they do, but who you are is really the person that you are. So for me, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm a mother-in-law. I mean, sorry, not a mother-in-law, not yet, sorry, sister-in-law. I am a mother, I am a girlfriend, I am a friend, I am a sorority woman. I am a pet owner. I am a cousin. I am a godmother. I am a aunt. I am a veterinarian. That is what I do, but it's also to my core who I am. I am a director. That's what I do, but I also who I am, and I am a manager. So these are all the things that I put together in a word cloud about who I am, and I am a sister in Christ. So I think I would ask you all to sort of do that for yourselves. Like, who are you? When people ask you who you are, or who do you want to be? Because that's important too, to write down what it is you want out of life and who you want to be as a person. So who are you? Do some of you want to open up and tell me who you are and why you wanted to be on this webinar or Zoom meeting today? And what do you hope to get out of it? So I can try to make sure I cover that in my discussion. Anyone?
Well, I can start. I'm very grateful that you can join us, Ms. Johnson. I'm the career facilitator for Gateway Regional High School. Several of my interns are on this Zoom. They're all interested in healthcare initiatives, healthcare careers, and I'm a 25-year educator, mom of 2, and that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Welcome. I'm glad to be here also.
Thank you. Someone's got to start. Now, girls, I know some of you are not shy, so unmute, let it rip.
All right, if we have shy people, that's fine. We can.
All right, they can chime in, but I do have some of them chiming in with their keyboard right now. So Abigail said that she has Wi-Fi issues, so she's going to have to chat. So we'll let Abigail chat in. Hannah mentioned that her name is her name is Hannah Crowley. I am a senior at Gateway, and I'm an athlete who is going to a 4-year university as a nursing major.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Hannah. Anybody else, please unmute yourself.
Okay, I'm gonna give it like 30 more seconds and then I'm gonna move on. And hopefully
here's another one.
Okay.
My name is Emma. I'm a senior at Gateway Regional High School. I'm going to, I'm attending Stockton University for exercise science, and she is also an athlete. Abigail with the Wi-Fi issues says, I'm a senior at Gateway, a daughter, a sister, and an athlete. I will be attending a 4-year university as a biology, psychology double major. Hannah also said, I would love to learn more about veterinary careers because I originally wanted to become a veterinarian before I had interest in nursing. Okay, thank you. And girls, or anybody, not just girls, anybody on the call, please just unmute yourself. I'm not going to bite. Colina's not going to bite. And even if we did, we can't bite you through the screen. So unmute yourselves and let's have a conversation this morning. This is for you.
I'll go if you want real quick before you begin.
Sure.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Ferber. I'm a senior at Gateway. I'm a daughter and I'm going to be attending Brown University for elementary education.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Great. Thank you so much for sharing. Again, I think it's important that you know who you are moving forward in life, and then you can add to your word cloud who you are, and again, like I said, who you want to be. Visualization is always always a good thing to have. All right, let's see here. Okay, so I grew up, born and raised in Philadelphia. I attended Walter Biddle Saul High School for Agricultural Sciences. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that school, but I knew from an early age that I wanted to be a veterinarian. And living in Philadelphia, there was really only three high schools you could go to. You could go to your local high school, you could go four, I guess. You could go to a private school, you could go to Girls High, or you could go to Saul, which both schools you had to test into. So I decided I wanted to go to a public school. And because I was interested in veterinary medicine, I wanted to go to Saul to get that experience working with animals, as well as a good education so that I could move forward and matriculate into a 4-year university and then move on to veterinary school. So I'm very familiar with Philadelphia, with the intricacies of Philadelphia, traveling by public transportation, and also, being a future farmer of America, because Saul was big into Future Farmers of America. So we would go to the farm show every year, and it just reinforced for me my love of animals and the medicine and all of the associated skill sets revolved around being a veterinarian. Now, I learned about veterinary medicine early on by, we used to go to Massachusetts every summer into this small little town. And believe it or not, in this small little town, they actually had a veterinarian, a person of color who was a veterinarian. So I did get to meet him and to go to his shop, his hospital, and actually see a cat surgery. I will say I was about 8 years old, and that first experience, I almost passed out. I'd never seen live tissue before, and it was very emotional for me, but it really instilled in me that this is really what I want to do. I want to be able to do surgery. I want to be able to help animals. So never deny your dreams. If you've had a dream your entire life, there's no reason why you shouldn't continue to push forward towards that dream. So in high school, I did a lot of volunteer opportunities. So I volunteered at the Philadelphia Zoo, and at the zoo, I ended up volunteering at the children's zoo. So I would feed the animals, I would bring them in, I would bring them out. I would help with the education of the public when they came into the children's zoo. I would clean up after the animals. And for me, volunteering starts early, and it's a great way to get into a field that you know a little bit about, but you don't know all about, and it gives you all different aspects of it. I also volunteered at the Haverford Animal Hospital, and at that time it was run by Dr. Carl Cousins, who was a great mentor to me. And I would go to his hospital 2 to 3 times a week and just watch him interact with patients. So I was getting 2 totally different aspects without being paid, of course. But again, once you volunteer, people are more likely to allow you into their space, because for one, they don't have to worry about paying you, and you're free labor, and everybody loves free labor. So for those of you who are moving on into healthcare fields and who may not have enough experience, or don't think you have enough experience, volunteering is always a great way to get in the door. And I will say that once you have those relationships, they'll always be there for you. Like Dr. Cousins was there my entire college career, as well through vet school. Anytime I had a question, anytime I needed some advice, he was always there for me. So during my high school career, I actually did have a paying job too. I worked at the International House of Pancakes, IHOP, as a waitress. And so I would volunteer on the weekends and then work during the week at IHOP. And then my senior year, there was an opportunity that came up at the school where they posted a job opportunity at the University of Pennsylvania working in the veterinary school. So I applied for the opportunity and got an interview. And the interesting thing is the day of the interview, there was a bird that fell out the nest, couldn't fly. And I had actually nursed a bird back to health previously. So I've always had veterinary medicine or being a veterinarian in my soul. It's in my DNA. And I was at school and I saw this bird. So I got a box from one of the administrators in the school put some grass in the bottom of it and took the bird with me on the bus from Roxborough all the way down to Center City or to University City to go to my interview. And I swear that having that bird with me got me that job because they saw my dedication. They saw the fact that I clearly was a little bit off because I carried a bird with me on public transportation to an interview, but that I had a love for animals. And that opportunity at University of Pennsylvania Veterinary School changed my career direction. I had always thought that I wanted to be a clinician. So a clinician is a veterinarian who works in a hospital, owns a hospital, sees patients on a regular basis, does spays, neuters, minor surgical procedures, things of that nature. After I did this experience at Penn, I worked in the lab at Penn, working with rats, doing injections, euthanizing the animals, and then collecting tissues because we were looking at how certain drugs interact with the liver, and then using that information to determine sort of path forward in the development of certain compounds for certain diseases. And doing that, I had the best time of my life. And I think that what it made me realize is that you can be a veterinarian and you can do more than just help animals, you can also help people. So for me, this was the opportunity to be able to help a multitude. So instead of helping one pet at a time, I was able to help millions of animals and millions of people just by working in what they call laboratory animal medicine. So part of this is about opportunities that come your way. Don't be afraid to just say yes, because you never know where something is going to lead you. And this begins my windy career path. From that one experience, again, that job at University of Pennsylvania, my whole trajectory sort of changed. So I went to Tuskegee University, as David said. Tuskegee University is in Alabama. I didn't visit the school before I went. I'd never been to Alabama before. And I went to a school that was in the middle of a tiny town that did not have public transportation. So I didn't have a car, and there was no public transportation. So it was a very enlightening experience to me in that I was exposed to a whole different way of life, where you actually had to walk everywhere, walk to the grocery store, walk to the movies, walk to everywhere, because there was no public transportation anywhere. And you couldn't even get to the other towns because unless you took the Greyhound bus, because there was no public transportation. Tuskegee is a historically Black college and university, and I decided in high school that that's where I was interested in going. I wanted to go to what we call an HBCU. And the other thing about Tuskegee is Tuskegee is the only college, Black college, historically Black college, that has a veterinary college. And what I did learn in doing my research, which again, it's very important to do your research and to understand the school that you're going to and the opportunities that the school affords you, is that going undergraduate to a school that has a graduate school that you're interested in, you have a better chance of getting in because you're able to meet the professors, you're able to meet the administration of that college if you put yourself out there to be able to get into that situation. And that helps in the decision-making process, as well as they understand what the education is that you're getting at the school that you're attending, because it is part of their whole larger university status. So I went to Tuskegee knowing that I was going to go to veterinary school. So as everyone who goes to college, you have a good time, but you have to remember that you're there for a purpose, right? That you went to college for a purpose, to graduate, to go to either nursing school or medical school or physical therapy school, whatever it is you want to do after college, that there are steps after that. And you still have to maintain your grades, maintain your relationships with your professors so that you can get good recommendations. All of those things are important. Well, I did that. But veterinary school is extremely difficult to get into because of the limited number of schools there are. Veterinary school is harder to get into than medical school because, again, because of the number of schools or lack there are of veterinary schools. So after my 4 years of college, I applied to veterinary school and I was waitlisted. So waitlisted is that I was number 1 on the wait list, means that if someone doesn't attend, that you get that spot. So unfortunately, I didn't get in the first time I tried. So again, my windy road, right? Just because you don't get in the first time doesn't mean that you give up and that you don't try again. There's always lessons to be learned. So I stayed in Tuskegee, my small little town in Alabama, and I worked at Wendy's. So I'm a college graduate and I'm working the window at Wendy's. I also worked at the dog track as a cocktail waitress, which was very lucrative. And again, kept me in some aspects around animals, but I needed to make money while I was applying again to veterinary school. And I also took another class to make me a more viable candidate for veterinary school. So again, part of this windy road, right? I had my life all planned out. I'd go to undergrad, I'd go to vet school, I'd do this, I'd do that. There's a little bump that occurs in the road. So I did this for a year, and Tuskegee also had a summer program for incoming veterinary students. And then I also worked in the summer program, hoping that all of this would help me in my application process. So lo and behold, it did. And my second time applying, I got in and I matriculated on to the veterinary school at Tuskegee. I will say that, again, bumps in the road occur, but you can't let that deter you if you have a goal in your heart and a dream that you see yourself doing and that you know that you were meant to do. So I'm in veterinary school and I am loving it. I love learning. I love all the different species I'm working with. So if you remember, earlier on, I decided that I wanted to do something in research. So I get into veterinary school and I'm loving equines. I'm loving equine surgery. I'm loving working with the horses. I'm loving the foaling of the horses. I'm loving all of that. And I'm thinking, well, maybe I should be an equine vet. And then there was the cows, and I love cows too. And I'm thinking, maybe I should be a dairy vet. And so every rotation that I went on, I loved it. And I decided, oh, maybe I want to do this. Maybe I want to do that. But at the end, I came back to what I had originally gone to veterinary school for, because the interesting thing is that with laboratory animal medicine, you can work with a multitude of species. So it's not like being a small animal practitioner where you can just work with dogs and cats, or a large animal where you just work with horses and cows and pigs. It's a discipline where you can work with all of the species because of the fact that the majority of them can be used in some aspect of research. And I'll go into more about what a laboratory animal veterinarian does so you clearly understand it. And so my story continues, right? So I graduate from veterinary school, and at graduation, you can apply. So prior to graduation, you apply for internships and residency programs. And I was so exhausted from veterinary school because any sort of professional school, it's not that it's hard. What it is it's the multitude of work. So it's so much work compressed into such a short period of time that I was just physically and mentally exhausted. And I just couldn't apply to anything. I couldn't think about writing any more papers or interviewing with any more people. So what I did is I didn't apply. And I decided I was just going to get a job and work in a clinic and be happy. And that was just what I was going to do, because I didn't want to do any more schooling. I didn't want to do any more learning. I was just done. I was completely done. So after veterinary school, you have your national board exams, which are a compilation of your 4 years of veterinary school and what you have learned. And then you have state examinations. So after you complete the national exam, you have to sit for certain state exams because states have different laws regarding rabies, regarding vaccinations are usually nationally set out by the AVMA, but there are laws about rabies, about housing animals, about leashes, about all kinds of different things. So you have to know your state laws. And then once you have your national boards and your state exams, you can apply for jobs in whatever state you're interested in. So I decided that I didn't want to come back to Pennsylvania, and I wanted to live in the DC area, DC, Virginia area. So I applied and got a job at Alexandria Animal Hospital in Alexandria, Virginia, where I worked at an emergency group. So I was working at nighttime, doing emergency medicine, which was great, except I was a young single woman who was working all weekends and evenings. So there was no time to meet people, no time to go out, no time to hang out with my friends. And I was on call every other weekend. So I really had no time at all. So I then moved to a different hospital, which was a Manassas Animal Hospital in Manassas, Virginia, which was a day clinic or day hospital where I saw patients during the day. I was still on call every other weekend, but at least that gave me free time during my weekends. I wasn't on call, to be able to go out, meet people, hang out with my friends. After about 2 years of doing that, I went back to my original plan because I realized that I was not interested in doing one animal at a time, that I really had a much more global view of healthcare. And my healthcare didn't just include individual pets and their families, but it included a much larger population of people. So after about 2 years of practice, I started applying to residencies and master's degree programs at universities. And the road is twisty again. So I'm applying, and I started, so it was 1 year was applying. So I started applying in like December, January. By February, March, I couldn't do it anymore. And I quit my job because I was mentally exhausted. I was not enjoying what I was doing. I didn't want to get out of bed in the morning and go to a job. And I will tell you, if you start thinking of what you're doing as a job instead of a career, and it doesn't invigorate you to get up in the morning, and you're not thinking about it throughout the day or at night, or thinking about ways to make yourself better, to be able to do your job better, you're probably not doing what you love and what you're supposed to do. And I felt that way. So I quit, and I said, I'm going to go do what I want to do. So while applying for internships, I also applied to a pharmaceutical company to work and to do like an externship so I could learn more about laboratory animal medicine. I got that in about March. I moved from Virginia back to Pennsylvania and started working. And 2 months later, I got the acceptance letter into a residency program. So I was supposed to be at this job a whole year. I only ended up being there like 4 months because I got into a residency program, and I started the residency program. So again, you have to do what feels best for you. And it's never a straight path. I don't think anybody I've ever met has had a straight path where they just did this, then did this, then did this, then did this. There's always a deviation where you go left or you go right. And then sometimes you may come back to that central path that you had started, or other times you continue to go left, and that's your new direction. But again, don't be afraid, right? Because there's a reason why things happen in your life, and there's lessons to be learned from every deviation that occurs within your life. And what I was learning was, one, patience, because I didn't have really good patience, learning patience, and also learning a lot about myself, that I am flexible, that I am fungible, that I can shift, that I know what I don't want to do, because knowing what you don't want to do is almost more important than knowing what you do want to do.
Colina, can I just stop you for a second and ask, we're just to let you know about time, we're about at about 10:30,
Okay.
just for pacing purposes. And I wanted to just ask the students at this point if they had any questions for you before moving on. One thing that I didn't know, actually, which I've learned through this already, is that I didn't realize you could take some time off and like put off your residency. For some reason, I always thought like your residency while you were in vet school or even medical school, I think it's a very similar process that you need to go through, but I realized you could put that off and then do a residency 2 years later. So, you know, students, I didn't know if you knew that.
Yep.
You know, those of you thinking about nursing, like what steps you might have to take, and if there's a pause point that you could push the button and pause your process for a little bit of time. So again, thank you. I learned something new today, but I also wanted to ask the students if you had any questions. Let me open the chat box here.
I have a quick question. You mentioned national exams and state exams for veterinary school towards the end. I was wondering how draining they were on you and how they took a toll on you, because I know that I am definitely a hard test taker. They hit me hard when I have to take state tests. So I'm just wondering how you prepared and how you did.
So that's a really interesting question, and thank you for that. So I am a horrible test taker. So because I overthink and overprocess, and what I've learned through test taking is usually the first thing that comes into your head is the right answer, because you do know the answer. Secondly, the way I studied is that I would study a little bit every night, or any cases that came in during the day, I would research them further to make sure that I knew all of the differential diagnoses, all of the treatment options that were available, reading the magazines associated with your profession so that you know what is out there in the literature, what other people are doing and how other people are treating cases. Those are the types of things, because it's more about a mindset, and once you have the mindset, you can sort of walk yourself through treatment options and differential diagnosis, and you know what else you need to be concerned about with this disease process. So it's sort of like a map that you sort of make in your brain, and you do that by just delving deep into sort of all aspects of veterinary medicine. I will say that going to professional school, they do prepare you well for it, but it's the minutia that you really have to study for. I hope that answers your question. Yes.
Do you think that by taking time in between medical or veterinary school and residency, do you think that had a negative impact on your residency experience? Like, were you surrounded by a lot of people who hadn't taken time off and things like that?
So that's a good question, and very interesting too. So, you know, so this was 25 years ago, and you bring different skill sets. And I do think that the average age sort of individuals going to veterinary school, it could be different than from medical school, but it's actually a little bit older, because a lot of times people going to veterinary school, it may be their second career, or they started off in business or in political science, but really had a love of animals. And so they switched career mid-college, and they ended up having to do an extra year, an extra 2 years of college. So the average age is not like 21, it's probably like 25. So experiences are important, because diversity is important, diversity of thought, diversity of mind. Those types of things are important, and that's what schools look for. They look for that they want you to have experience with animals. They want to make sure that this is really what you want to do, that you've taken the time to explore and know, because again, it's not that it's hard, but it's a lot of work. And if you don't love what you're doing, it's going to be harder for you to get through it.
Colina, if I could just jump in, you know, for those of you that joined me last week, you know, obviously there are a lot of parallels to what I talked about and what we're talking about today, with twists and turns in the road, right? I mean, a lot of students just, I think they've been told, or they just anticipate that their path is going to be straight. And that's, as you've heard now 2 weeks in a row, that's not the case. And even for me, I told you after college, I was exhausted from studying too. And while I thought I was going to medical school, and that was still my plan, I needed some time off. And that allowed me to take a job as a scientist. And that opportunity, that experience put me on a path that was completely different than what I thought. So those experiences will help guide and shape your life. And you know, shoot, there's another point I was going to make. Oh, talking about that time off, that allowed me to actually stay in the biomedical science field as a scientist. So even if I was going to medical school, I was accepted to medical school, right? I had acceptances in my back pocket. I just didn't take them. But I think that experience of taking the time off and diversifying my thinking, diversifying what I've done professionally, it allowed me to look more favorably to these medical schools. So again, there's no reason, there's nothing in my mind, unless you're like want to just keep going, but there are benefits of taking some downtime and figuring out what that next step is going to be.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Okay, I'll finish quickly because I need to be finished by what time?
I think we're good till 11.
Okay. We'll have plenty of time for questions then. So after I left the pharmaceutical company, I went to Penn State Hershey Medical Center, which is where the residency was. And I do think, so back to the question, I do think that because of the fact that I had worked in clinical practice and that I also had worked in pharma was a benefit and a plus for me to be able to get a residency, because I had already had experience in doing what I wanted to do and showed that I had an aptitude for it, as well as that I was pushing forward because this is what I wanted to do. So what exactly is laboratory animal medicine, right? Because it's one of the disciplines within the veterinary field, but it's not one that you hear a lot about. So it encompasses many fields that relate to animal research. So there's teaching, there's testing, there's etiology, there's welfare, biology, biosafety, genetics, physiology, regulatory affairs, toxicology, animal model development, pathology, diagnostics, and husbandry. So it encompasses basically everything associated with animals, with drug development, with being able to take a drug from the chemist's bench all the way to market, which is extremely important, right? Because doing that, you're testing it on animals. So you're also knowing that it works in animals for whatever the disease process may be. And then it also works in humans. So again, what my goal was to do something global, do something that would help millions instead of just one animal at a time. And I had found the field that fulfilled what my niche was and what I was interested in doing, as well as the fact of being able to work with numerous animal species. So being a laboratory animal vet, I've worked with woodchucks, I've worked with pigs, I've worked with cows, I've worked with guinea pigs and rabbits and mice and cats and dogs and zebrafish and non-human primates, all different types of non-human primates. And the species list just continues to grow as we continue to find new and innovative ways to work with animals, to be able to find animal models for human diseases. And some of these are spontaneous that the animals have already, and that we're able to find drugs for cures for these diseases, or at least to lessen the pain of some of these diseases. So how does laboratory animal medicine relate to biomedical research? So first we have to know what biomedical research is, right? And I'm sure you all do, because you all are interested in biomedical research, but it's ways to prevent and treat diseases that cause illness and death in people and animals. So you see how laboratory animal medicine and biomedical research truly relate together, and how the two walk hand in hand. So though I may not be doing the actual design of the studies, where I have worked in neuroscience for probably the majority of my career, which whoever thought I'd be working in neuroscience. I've worked in women's health, looking at bone loss, so in osteoporosis in women's. I've worked in cardiovascular and metabolic diseases, looking at mitral valve insufficiencies, looking at heart attacks, looking at aortic stenosis, looking at infectious disease and vaccinations, and you know, with the neuroscience, working on Parkinson's, working on Alzheimer's, all of these diseases that affect people that we know, hypertension, right? So I've worked on all of these types of programs, looking to find cures, looking for vaccines for Gardasil. So Gardasil for oh my gosh, genital okay, I can't remember what Gardasil is for right now, but for Gardasil. So I've worked on human papillomavirus. So I've worked on a lot of different programs for a lot of different disease processes that have made drugs that have gone to market that have been able to help people, and in that process have been able to use those same drugs to help animals or a variation of those animals. Now, there is an animal health group also, and there's a human disease group. So you can work in either one, either making drugs specifically for animals or making drugs for the human population that uses animals. So it's a diverse field that has lots of different paths that you can take, as well as being a principal investigator, right? So there's many things you can do. So I just put a slide here quickly about what laboratory animal veterinarians do. It's not all inclusive, but it sort of gives you a view of what a day may look like. So there's model development. So looking at whether or not it's using an animal or using an in vitro system best to do the development. But because of FDA rules and regulations, you do have to at some point put these compounds in animals to see what it does on a system, on a biological system. It's consultation with investigative staff. So there's still a lot of interaction with humans and individuals about what their studies are, what they're trying to accomplish with their studies, what they need to accomplish their studies, what sort of timeline do they have to accomplish their studies, what sort of skill sets do they have in their lab, or what sort of skill sets do you need to develop. So there's always learning that's going on of yourself, because these may not be areas that you're familiar with. So you have to do your own research to read up on them, to understand the disease process, to think outside the box of ways that you can help move this process along. There's clinical care, because regardless of the fact they're animals and they have they fight with each other, they have toothaches, they tear their nails, they may eat something that doesn't agree with them. They could have GI upset. They could have some sort of genetic problem that they may have. They could have a cardiac issue, all types of things that humans have, animals have also. There's surgery involved, whether it be implanting a access port for a animal so that you're able to draw blood easier. There could be, other sort of telemetry devices that you put in so you're able to monitor them without having to touch them, monitor them remotely. There's anesthesia for that surgery. There's analgesia in case anything that goes on with them is painful. There's independent research that you can do associated with a program that may be a one-off. Or if you're in an academic setting, there's your own research they may do. There's facility management, because you have a whole facility that takes care of these animals that you need to make sure is running appropriately, that you have the staff to run it, that you have the expertise needed to run it, that the temperatures are right, that the airflow is right, that the size of the facility is good. And there's so much more that goes into being a laboratory animal veterinarian. And there's opportunities to do things like this, to meet with you all, to talk with you all about what I do and how I ended up where I am today.
Could I just interject one with another question? You mentioned that the facility management, is that a responsibility specifically of the lab animal veterinarians, or are there others that help you and facilitate that process to manage the staff? Or is that all on the veterinarian, or you as the lead animal health expert?
So it kind of depends on how the facility is set up. In some institutions, it is the veterinarian, the lab animal veterinarian, who is responsible for that and has people underneath them who have the expertise that do the job. There are some facilities that don't have a full-time lab animal vet that may have a part-time vet, where the facility manager is an individual who has expertise in biomedical research and in management and runs the facility on a daily basis, but they still have some reporting relationship to that vet because there's an attending vet that is the institutional official that is responsible for the facility in general. So it kind of depends on the situation and how the facility is set up. Yep. So there are also other fields within veterinary medicine. So I was focusing on laboratory animal medicine because that's what I do. But just like human medicine, there's pathology, there's ophthalmology, there's surgery, there's anesthesia, there's behavior, there's acupuncture, there's cardiology, there's neuroscience, there's internal medicine, there's oncology, and the list just goes on of specialties, which again is in additional years after veterinary school. But to become a specialist in anything, or as Malcolm Gladwell says, to be to be knowledgeable about anything takes at least 10,000 hours. So it's the same thing for being a specialist. It just takes more time, more expertise, more focused attention on specific areas. And for those of you in nursing, you have the same sort of thing. You can specialize. So you can continue to subspecialize until you're so small and involved in such a small area that you then become the expert in that field, because it's such a tiny, tiny aspect of a larger field, but it's extremely important. So remember what I was saying about veterinary medicine before? So there's only 28 veterinary colleges in the United States, and there's 18 outside of the United States. So if you think about that compared to the number of medical schools, where almost every institution has a medical school associated with it, you can see why the ability to get into veterinary school is so much more difficult than that of medical school. And I like to liken a veterinarian to like a pediatrician or a neonatologist, because as with a pediatrician or a neonatologist, your patients can't talk to you, right? If you're a general practitioner, your patients can tell you what they're feeling, what they're seeing or what they're not seeing. Whereas if you're a pediatrician or a veterinarian or a neonatologist, your patients don't talk to you. So you rely on either what you see diagnostically or what the owner or parent tells you about the patient. So you're relying on secondhand knowledge versus firsthand knowledge. So some of the lessons learned that I have is don't be afraid to say yes. All you have is time, and don't put limitations on yourself or your life. Don't let people tell you you can't do something. Believe in yourself. If you don't know something, say you don't know, but that you will find out the answer and then do it. You only have one life to live, so you want to live it to the fullest. Do what you love. And then always tell the truth. You learn more from your mistakes. And then some of my favorite quotes that I'm going to leave you with. So Michael Jordan, I've missed over 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed. And then my last one, from Maya Angelou. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. So, any additional questions?
I encourage everybody to unmute yourselves again. Obviously, I think there are some parallels too, but obviously differences between, but parallels to human medicine and veterinary medicine. So I'm sure you could get some additional input and guidance with any questions that you might have, especially those of you that are thinking about going into nursing. And I would also, most of us on the call, or I can't say most of us, most of you on the call today are female. which is why we are bringing in, a high number of female professionals. So if there's anything specifically about a professional life for another female that has gone through it, has raised a family, has 3 kids, and has done a ton in her life, this is a time for you to pick their brains as well.
I didn't see Tuskegee on the list. Do they still have a veterinary school?
Tuskegee? Oh, yeah. Yep.
Oh, I just didn't see it on the list that you had put up. That's why
I think it was one of the 2 in Alabama.
Oh, yes, 2 in Alabama. Yes.
Alabama, okay.
Yeah,
Oh.
University of Auburn has a veterinary school, and then Tuskegee. They're like 20 miles apart.
Okay, great.
I have a question.
Mhm.
Was it really like more difficult for you, do you feel like, to get into a residency program since you took like a gap, or do you think that like it helped you?
That's a good question. I don't know. I will say that, the residency program for lab animal medicine now is a little different than what it was when I applied. So now it's part of the match system. So everything is part of the match system. And when I was looking for residencies, they were not. Lab animal medicine wasn't in the match system. So that may make somewhat of a difference now. Because you will be competing against those students that are just coming out of veterinary school versus you who may have taken some time off and done some alternate routes, right? But the thing is that there's still not all the residencies. I don't think all of them are in the match program, and there's always ways around things. Sometimes people decide at the last minute they're not going to a residency, so that there's an opening so that you can apply that way. So there's one way to do things, and then there's the alternate way to do things. So again, I wouldn't put, I think that if it's meant for you to do, the opportunity will open itself up.
So one does not need to do a residency to be able to practice medicine as a veterinary medicine or as a veterinarian.
So it depends, right? So if you want to be so for lab animal medicine, if you want to be board certified in laboratory animal medicine, you can either do one of 2 routes. You can do the residency route and then take the test after like 3 years, or if you do a experience route, it's like 6 or 8 years that you have to work in laboratory animal medicine. You have to document all the things that you did, and then you have to send in your application to the board for them to determine if you've had enough experience to be able to sit for the test. So like I said, there's alternate routes to do things.
And for those students that may not know what a match system is, could you just briefly explain that terminology?
Yeah, so the match system is when you are nearing the end of your professional degree and you apply to certain institutions that have the programs that you're interested in. So if you're interested in pathology, there are a certain number of institutions that have pathology residencies. So you would go, you would look those institutions up, see if they have what you're interested in, and then you would apply. And if your application is one of the top, I don't know how many they pick, 10 or 15 that they pick, you then go for an interview, you meet the staff, you walk around the institution, you meet the leadership of that institution, and then you rank them. So you rank the different programs that you granted you interviews, and if you rank them the same that they rank you, then that's a match, and that's how you end up at an institution to do a residency. So there are some people that don't match, so they either wait to see if the people that matched actually go there, or they can take a year and do a fellowship and then come back and apply again later. So again, like I said, if you do something different, you learn something about yourself, you learn some additional skill sets, and it helps you really to focus on what it is you really want to do. And then you figure out how to get it done.
Thank you. Abigail has a question that she typed into the chat box. I know that females are underrepresented in medicine. Do you feel like you experienced any negative sides of that, or any pressure to go away from work and settle down with a family, etc.?
I think so. So I think what happens is, and I will say that veterinary medicine is probably one of the fields where it is majority women. So vet school classes now are probably like 75 to 80% women. So women have really taken over veterinary medicine because it's not seen as lucrative as the other medical fields like human medicine. So women have sort of just gravitated to this. Plus, I think women are more compassionate too. That's just a personal opinion. But I think that, you know, during your career, if you decide to have children and to have a family, that you do suffer some of the consequences of it, unless your partner decides to stay home to take care of the kids, because you do, you know, you're pregnant for 9 months and then you have a baby and then you're off for 8 weeks to, well, between 6 weeks and 12 weeks, depending on what you decide to do and what kind of birth you have, while your colleagues are working that entire time. So it can have an effect on your career. I think that you can sort of counteract that by making sure that you are on top of your game all the time, that you are proactive, that again, that you're saying yes. I think a lot of those principles and lessons that I have learned are things that I did. Like I always said, yeah, whenever said, well, is anybody interested in this? Yep, I'm interested. Because I figured the more that I learned, the more people that I interacted with, the more people that would speak up for me when opportunities arose, because, oh yeah, I worked with her before, she did a great job. And that's why it's always important to tell the truth. And if you don't know something, say you don't know it and figure it out, and then come back and say, I told you I'd get back to you. Well, this is the answer to this, because all of those things matter. And like Maya Angelou's quote, I truly believe that has been extremely blessed my life, because of the fact that it is important about how you make people feel. It's important that you be open and that you be inclusive and that you treat everyone the same, because you never know that vet student or that grad student or that professor that you worked with that you didn't have such a great relationship could end up being head of some company somewhere, that then you apply for a job and he's like, you know, you didn't treat me so good. And those kind of things resonate with people because they think about what they want their company to look like, how they want the people that they work with to be. And if you haven't treated someone the way that you wanted to be treated, it could backfire on you. So some of those things are just important as part of being a human being on this planet, right? They're just good lessons and good things to just keep in mind to do, because you never know, right? Who can help you? Who's going to be there?
Great advice. Abigail, thank you. She has another question. I had one more question as well. We talked a lot about your past, but not future. Do you see yourself making any big career changes, or do you have any major expansion goals for yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm always open to new opportunities and taking on new leadership roles. So you know, I think that these past 2 years or so, like I had been I had worked at the Kenilworth site. So I'd done, and so just give you a little bit of background quickly. So I was the manager of the experimental surgery group. So I did that for about 5 or 6 years. And then after that, I had an opportunity to actually run a site in New Jersey. So I was going to New Jersey 3-4 days a week to run a site in New Jersey. I ended up having to close that facility. And then after that, I went and did a stint in project management so that I could learn late stage drug development. And then when I came back after that, I now have the South San Francisco site, though I live in Pennsylvania, that I'm responsible for, as well as I have a person that reports to me from Boston and a person that reports to me from Pennsylvania. So I'm continuing to diversify myself Now I'm leading like the whole management group within my group. I run the meetings, I set the objectives with the team. So there's always a next step. And again, it's always because I'm like, okay, I'll try that. Okay, I'll do that. So future, I don't know what the future holds. You know, I like what I'm doing now, and I think that's important. You like what you do, you do really well at what you do. There's always that next step that opens up for you.
Great advice. I'm a yes person as well. It's one of my, if I'm asked about a flaw, I'd probably say it's one of my biggest flaws. I have a hard time saying no, but you know, it's a great way to learn, and it's a great way to get yourself out there. And finding something that you love. I want to echo that, because before everybody got on the call today, Colina and I were talking about, you know, working from home and the difficulty of kind of stepping away from work sometimes, because you're at home working and you're always there. But for me, I really, you know, I enjoy what I do. I love what I do. I love my job, and it doesn't feel like work when I'm working. I actually look forward to coming back up to my office some nights to continue what I'm doing. So I can't stress that enough, that if it's starting to feel onerous, if it's starting to bring you down, it might be time for a change. And I've experienced that throughout my journey as well. And I'm thankful that, you know, at 40 years old, I joined an organization that I never even heard of before, but I couldn't be happier with what I'm doing. So I just want to pause, and I know we're at 11:01. But if there's any pressing questions that anybody on the call still has, I want to leave the opportunity, as long as it's okay with our speaker, to answer those questions.
I just have one really quick question.
Mhm.
So how did you like prioritize everything you needed to get done? Because I know there's a lot of things that you have to like do and work with. So how did you like make sure you stay organized and prioritize everything that needed to get done?
That's a really good question. Prioritization is hard. So I would say during vet school, it's prioritizing based on the schedule of the way the tests fall, and also incorporating into that what subject you're not as good in, right? Because that's the one you're going to have to spend more time on. So understanding that and figuring that out. In life in general, it's about who needs something immediately and what can wait, because nobody can multitask, because your brain doesn't multitask, right? You switch from one to the other. So it's not multitasking, it's switching from one to the other. And it's best to just focus on one thing, get it done, then move to the next thing, because that way you're more productive than the whole multitasking. And I'm still working on that, believe me. I understand the concept of it, but doing it is really, really hard. And I think that it's really about understanding yourself, for one thing, because you will always do what you want to do, and you'll spend time on doing what you want to do. But sometimes you have to realize there are other things that are important, that either someone needs something at this particular time frame, and this is the only time frame they need it in, and you have to figure out yourself how to get done all those things that you need to get done. And it's a juggling act, truthfully.
I think that's great advice.
It is a juggling act.
Some of the kids on this
And
call,
I still struggle with that myself too.
yeah. Don't you think sometimes it's like you look at the giant long list of things you have to do over the next 2 months, and when you start to panic, and I know some of the girls on here are, they're highly motivated, and you can get easily overwhelmed. What you need to do, at least what works for me, is I'm like, what can I get done today?
And check it off.
Yes. What can I get done today? Worry about the day. And if that's too overwhelming, you worry about the next 2 hours.
Yep.
And then you realize you're not, you can't get it all done, and don't look too far ahead.
No.
Have your long-term goals, but focus on the day, get through the day, especially during a pandemic. It is get through the day. What can I rationally get done? Because I think sometimes people have those irrational goals of 30 things. And then I'm going to fit in a workout, in between.
And I should say, sometimes the strategy that I use is even if it's not the highest priority, if it's a low hanging fruit, I might do it quickly if I can get it done and not put off too much other things, because it feels good sometimes just to check 1 or 2 boxes, and it kind of gets me motivated, say, oh, okay, and it settles me down, and it's just the psychological aspect of getting something done. So that's another piece of advice that you can try as well.
And do
And
you
don't
know people
procrastinate.
use lists? Do you think they use lists? I feel like lists are such a visual of getting things done. I know I'm old, but
It was my list.
yeah, I know. Do you girls use lists? Anybody use lists? I know the older folks do, but
So I don't actually, I
you use a list?
don't, I keep my list in my head. So,
Wow, that's
Yeah.
more pressure.
yeah. But, and two, the other thing too to remember is that day by day, or even hour by hour, your priority list may change, and that's okay too, that you can flip things around if need be. So,
Right.
mhm.
Thank you so much. This was awesome.
Yes, thank you, Colina. Everybody, I don't know if you want to unmute yourselves or put it, snap, whatever people do now on webinars, but thank you so much for sharing your time and your experience today. I found this extremely valuable. I'm sure the girls did as well. Terrence, thank you for joining us today. We welcome you back on future calls, as well as and any of your students out of NPP.
Hey, Terrence. Didn't get to meet. Hello.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Very valuable information. Can I just ask one quick question about the correlation with technology and the field of study that you guys are in? How much technology do you have to, understand and know as you do what you do?
Oh, so a lot. So when you talk about technology, you're talking about computers, you're talking about,
Yes.
so computers for things like this, right? Presentations, for writing papers, for evaluating data. There's all kinds of technology that we use for the chemistries, for the blood work that's being done, for all the science, HPLCs, all the different technology science that we do. There's tons of technology involved with it.
Okay.
We have tons of instrument techs. I mean, there is a lot of things.
And it's
Anesthesia machine.
It's all built into the study. You get that as you go along. You get that. Okay, that teaches.
Yep.
And there are like specialty fields as well. Like if you don't become the veterinarian, but you want to become the instrument technologist, you would specialize in that particular instrument or general field of equipment, let's say. And I think there's another step that you could think about as well, which is the underlying coding and computer science of those pieces of equipment and those technologies that we might all use and be very good at, but we don't understand what's under the hood, right? So I think as a professional in a different field, you can get by with understanding how the computer works generally, how to, use Excel, how to use PowerPoint, how to use Word, maybe some of the, the equipment that you're working with on a day-to-day basis, or some of the science methodologies. But then if there's also opportunities to dig under the hood and be the person that codes that equipment or codes that, so I think there's different levels of technology that one can think about as well.
Okay.
Yeah, and we also have cage washers, we have rack washers. I mean, all these kind of temperature controlled machines, huge HVAC. Engineering is huge within our business to take care of the building. So there's a ton of things as far as technology. And I didn't go into that part because I kept it at the science part, but the technology is unbelievable. Yeah.
Are there internship opportunities and things like that, the volunteer type opportunities in that vein as well as the medical vein?
So I do know that we have they have internships in like engineering. So pharmaceutical companies are large in general and have so many different components to it. And a lot of them have internships. And most of these in pharmaceutical companies are mostly paid. In smaller businesses, you can probably do them for free. But it's so much work to do to get someone in, you might as well just pay them. But there's engineering, which has a lot of it. There's IT, which does a lot of it also. So yeah, they have summer internships in both of those types of things, which are the technology part.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep, and feel free to reach out if you have any other additional questions or, want to explore anything anymore.
Sounds good. We'll do.
Okay.
We'll do.
All righty.
Thank
All
you.
right, Colina, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll let you off the hook here at
Okay.
11:10. Thank you again for all the students that joined us this morning, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
Thanks for
Bye.
meeting or making this happen, David.
Yes, David. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.